Hi there, this is APES Chapter 8 lecture video part 2. So here's the second half of Chapter 8. So we were talking about population pyramids last time. We did some math growth rate problems. So now let's talk about some statistical, more demographic values. Total fertility rate, TFR, you'll see it. This appears on the AP test every year. You're gonna get a TFR question. This basically has to do with the average number of children born per woman. Okay, born per woman. Now, the what's called replacement fertility, this is the value that they have calculated that would keep the population size as a whole stable. So worldwide, if we had a 2.1 TFR, that's called the replacement fertility, we would be replacing ourselves and our mating partner, and we would, why 2.1? Because you have deaths that take place, so not, it's kind of like, 2.1 households. Every now and then someone will have 3 or 4 kids where someone has 1 kid, all right? So it all starts to balance out. This is the value that would replace us for the most part. Okay, certain countries have TFR values way above 2.1. What would you expect their population to be doing? Going up. If your TFR is at 2.1, your population should stay stagnant. If your population is below 2.1, your population size will be decreasing, basically. Just about every European nation has a TFR below 2.1, basically. The rate of natural increases, this is what you would expect to happen, right? Based off of birth and death rates alone. Now, immigration and emigration have a huge factor on population growth. A war-torn country, people are going to leave that place, and they're leaving it in masses. That happens a lot in war-torn areas. Okay, so emigration is a big deal. Places like the United States or Europe, we have a lot of immigration. Okay, in our country. So the TFR, this is the U.S. is about 1.8. This is below replacement fertility. But the United States, our population, our growth rate is not decreasing. Our growth rate is going up. It's kind of like the tragedy of the commons. Third world countries, lower socioeconomic places, they're having more children than they should, okay, for the sake of the earth. And then they're leaving those countries and then they're trying to come to places like Europe and North America to have a better life, okay? So you'll see here, look, Australia and South Pacific. Australia per se is just included in this group, but I don't know if Australia's TFR is quite so high. But this includes all these island areas in the South Pacific, lower socioeconomic, more third world, where you're going to have a higher TFR value. Look at Africa. People have about 5 kids per female. It's a lot of people there. A lot of them are dying there, though, because of things like HIV, and we're going to talk about that in a second. All right. So life expectancy, how long we expect to live in the United States. I believe in 2019 it was 80. I believe I've seen it at 81. I've seen it at 79, but it's about 80. Females have maybe a year or two more life expectancy than males. So now let's talk about how there's a series of stages of economic and cultural change that take place within a country when they're trying to get industrialized, or they want to go from third world to first world. They want to go from developing to develop. There's a bunch of stages that take place. This is called demographic transition. All right. The pre-industrial stage. All right. This is the pre-industrial stage. Well, what happens here in the pre-industrial stage is people have a lot of kids because a lot of them die at an early age. This is, a disease breaks out and you have an epidemic constantly. You're talking in the United States, this was a long time ago, okay? Long time ago. Before the Industrial Revolution, you're talking, all right? So that's our history, but not every country has our history, or England's history, for example. When we talk about Industrial Revolution, certain countries, they haven't even had their Industrial Revolution yet, so they're very primitive, so to speak. So what's happening in the pre-industrial stage? People are having a ton of kids. Population grows, okay? Population's growing. Overall stable. The reason it's not growing too rapidly is because you have a lot of death taking place too. People don't live as long in this pre-industrial stage, right? Then a place or a country goes through what's called a transitional stage, right? So look, pre-industrial stage, you have birth and death rates are fluctuating. They're balancing each other out. Okay, there's a balance here for the most part. So you'll see population isn't growing that much in pre-industrial stage because death rates are so high. All right, transitional stage. All right, birth rates are still high. All right, birth rates are still high. All right, this is considered high birth rate. This is a high birth rate right here. Okay, birth rates are still high. All right, but things are starting to get better. There might be more jobs Technology is starting to improve. They're making more food. So you'll start to see death rates go down. And this generally does happen. All right. So in a country, pre-industrial stage, death rates are high, birth rates are high, and they kind of balance each other out. When it goes through the transitional stage, medicine gets better, more food, nutrition increases, death rates go down, birth rates still stay really high. Okay. Next stage, the industrial stage. Birth rates start to decline. Why? Women begin joining the workforce. Women start to think about, maybe I don't want to have as many kids. I have a job. We need my income. So the industrial stage starts creating opportunities for women. Okay, women don't want to have as many kids. Birth control doesn't necessarily mean um, they're constantly, they're always using condoms or they're always using birth control. That means, how about they're just not, they just don't, they're not choosing to have as many kids. That's part of it too. So death rates are still low because we've gotten smarter, right? But birth rates start to drop, and this was what happens. Okay, post-industrial stage. This is where the United States would be, like Japan, parts of Europe. Our birth rates now are lower. We just started TFRs around 1.8. We're not having as many kids. Our death rate is still low because of medicine and technology, and we kind of create stability. All right, this is the stages of demographic transition. All right. Um, Basically, this happens in a lot of places, but certain countries and certain governments, depending on what they have going on in their area, they're limited to what they could do. All right. So let me give you an example. Demographic fatigue has to do with the population fatigues, and what happens to it? Things happen in Africa. They have an HIV problem, an AIDS problem. It's a very, very big problem there. What has it done? It has killed many, many people from the workforce. And the people that it's killing from the workforce are elderly. They are the prime age of the workforce. You're talking people in their 20s and 30s and 40s, and a lot of them are dying due to HIV and eventually dying of AIDS. They're succumbing to AIDS. All right, that's the disease, that's the virus. So, does the government have an overwhelming challenge when they're dealing with something like this? Yeah. Okay. Overpopulation is part of the problem. All right. So sometimes getting through a transitional stage, sometimes you can't even get through it just because you have too many people already, and it creates havoc on what could happen. All right. Population society. Here we go. Here. All right. So what can affect the number of babies born in a nation? Okay. What are the things that affect it? All right. Well, we already said money affects it. Okay. More money, people are working more jobs. Generally, fertility goes down, especially jobs for women. All right. Now, societal factors. We talked about, people having babies because they need a retirement. And that's not uncommon in a lot of places. What can control that or help control fertility? Well, contraceptives, things that'll help you not get pregnant. All right. Some places culturally they don't believe in their use, so part of it is acceptance from an educational standpoint too. Women's rights. The more rights women have, they start making different decisions. Women's rights involve learning to read too. Something as simple as that. If you look at the number of people around the world that cannot read, they're mostly women. All right, people who are illiterate in our world are mostly women. Yeah. Culture, we talked about that. TV programs, a lot of these TV programs, people want to copy what they see. All right. Money, more money people have, they generally, you'd think they'd have more kids because they can spend more. Not necessarily the case. More money people have, the more they spend, it decreases fertility, birth rate. Child labor, people need their children. We've already spoken about that. Their children out of work to help them out. All right. And can the government help retirees? Because if we don't have government programs that help people when they retire, people got to have more kids because their kids are their retirement. This all comes down to how do you control populations? Well, family planning. Right? Family planning is important. Right? Birth control. We talked about that. Preventing pregnancy, contraception. All right? Showing you all the ways of controlling population growth. Women have a reproductive window, so they have like a fertility window, so to speak. What are those years? Well, this is their window. Okay, so from their teen years to up to about 50 is when they have their last menstrual cycle, and then they enter menopause, which means they're no longer releasing an egg every month. They have a lot of hormone changes in their bodies taking place at that time, preventing them from releasing an egg. Shows you it depends on what country you're in, on how early it's accepted to start having children. Here in the US, yes, we do have teenage parents, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's unaccepted. I would just say you don't see it as often, or as it's not as common. Why in the United States? Because women have a lot of opportunities. They don't have children usually quite as young. Depends on where in the United States you are. The bigger the city, people start having children, women especially at older ages. I believe, like New York, for example, like cities like New York and San Francisco, a lot of women don't begin having children until their 30s and 40s in some cases, because they're working on their careers down here. I mean, imagine if you're a young female and you want to become a physician. You're talking many years of school. By the time you're done with school, you're in your later 20s already. So basically, this shows you the fertility window here, the reproductive window. And it depends on the country on when the people find it more acceptable to start having children. Um, Basically, around the world, it's working. The more family planning that people put in place around the world, the statistics are showing that it is working. Okay, Thailand put some programs into place, and it helped. Basically, family planning, making contraception something that people can get their hands on easily, making birth control something people can get their hands on easily. It can help control population size. All right. One of the biggest factors that reduces fertility rates, the one of the biggest is empowering women. It truly is. I've seen on almost every AP test, I've seen a question about this. Specifically, the answer is almost always related to women. Women being able to read, women being able to get jobs, women having, making, salaries comparable to men. Once you've empowered women, you will start seeing less children being born. It's just common. A lot of these women, they can't have 4 or 5 kids because they can't maintain their jobs. They'll lose the opportunity. They'll lose promotions, and their careers would be stagnant if they had that many children. They may even lose their career altogether. It's very expensive to care for kids. Very expensive. Um, Basically, we already said this: more money, lower fertility. Yeah, poor societies, you just generally have more kids. Okay, and you'll see here rate of natural increase. Percentage wise, and look, Africa is growing the most rapid. You have Asia, Latin America, and Caribbean, and then here North America and Europe were lower on the rate of natural increase. Okay, so the rate of natural increase doesn't include emigration and immigration. This is just due to births and deaths. So Europe is right here towards the bottom, which is really good. And then the United States. And look, per capita, how much money we're making in a household, basically, per household. And the United States has a very high per capita. All right, we spend a lot of money. Yeah. Okay. Um, what's happening is they expect that the countries that are going to be adding the most to the population in the future, they're going to be countries that are growing. Okay, they're growing, and as they're growing, we're going to start seeing some major environmental impacts. Like, for example, look what's happening here in Asia. I mean, it's growing. Africa, it's growing, right? So they expect Africa to get to more than double in the next 35 years. Australia, about the same. Latin America, it's not changing a great deal. North America, not a lot. Okay, but what's happening with us is immigration. Europe, same thing, but they're getting immigration too. So we're growing a little bit here. They're growing a little bit here. They're staying stagnant, excuse me. But look at this: Asia, Africa, big, big, big growth. All right. So we've already said more money you spend, the more you impact society. There's a lot of repetition in this chapter. You're probably noticing that, but it's real simple. Wealth means more environmental impacts because you're going to spend more money and there's more resources being consumed. Um, Basically, we spoke about this in the first chapter. We talked about an overshoot, and we talked about terminology involving your ecological footprint. So we are currently basically they believe humanity is about 50% beyond our means currently. So we're using 50% beyond our means, which means we have an overshoot. We're using more than we're we're using more resources that are being produced each year, basically, by a lot. Okay. Biocapacity, well, how much land is available for life for the most part? Okay. Um, when we when the ecological footprint, when it's less than the biocapacity, when it's less than that, it was we have a reserve of space. Okay, we have a reserve. So they're kind of trying to use terms kind of like business and financial terms. In this case, you have a reserve. All right. If you're living below, if our footprint is less than the biocapacity, then that means we have more land available to us. Okay, that means we have more land available to us. That ends our lecture today.